I'd now like to introduce Senator Ben Cardin. Senator Cardin has been a member of the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship since he was elected to the Senate in 2006. As the committee's ranking member, Senator Cardin has worked to find better ways to provide access to credit for qualified small businesses and entrepreneurs. He has also advocated for expanding access to contracts for women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. Bob, back over to you.
Hey, Senator.
Bob, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
It's good to be with you.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Please. I want to start with some news of yesterday and news of today. You're a senior member of the Foreign Relations panel. The president yesterday said we're out of the Iran nuclear deal. Now, you opposed an Iran nuclear deal at first, but you do not think this decision was wise, based upon a press release I saw yesterday.
Well, first, Bob, it's great to be with you. I thought when I returned to the Small Business Committee, I was avoiding the Iran questions, but I guess I was wrong. But it really is good. The president's decision, I disagree with it, primarily because he's isolating America. And he's given Iran a pass. They're going to be claiming, and rightly so, that the United States is violating the agreement, not Iran. And Iran's activities are extremely dangerous. Outside of the nuclear aspects, they are engaged in support of terrorism, the ballistic missile violations, and we should be working with the international community to hold Iran liable. I think by pulling out of the agreement while Iran is in compliance, it makes it more likely rather than less likely that Iran will become a nuclear weapon state and that we will have less support for dealing with their non-nuclear violations. So I think it's against our national security interest.
Trump has tweeted that the 3 Americans have now been freed from North Korea. Do you think that pulling out of the Iran deal has repercussions on the talks with North Korea?
Well, I think they're separate. There is no sensible military solution to North Korea. We have to find a diplomatic solution. I think the president's right to explore the diplomacy. I think that as the administrator's director of CIA, Mr. Pompeo's visit to North Korea was the right thing to do. So we are very much supporting the president and the diplomacy so that North Korea gives up its nuclear ambitions. I think initially what we're looking for is a freeze and inspectors on the ground and developing confidence between North Korea and the United States and China and South Korea and all the regional partners. And the release of these prisoners is a good sign. So right now things are positive. Mm-hmm. I think the Iran nuclear decision on that agreement is not helpful because it certainly will come up in negotiations as to whether America can be trusted with its agreements. So General Dunford mentioned that in one of his reasons for supporting the continuation of the Iran nuclear agreement is that the reliability of the United States and the credibility of the United States is affected.
Okay, on small businesses, we heard I had a question earlier for the administrator on healthcare costs. When you talk to small business owners or would-be small business owners, what are the biggest challenges they're facing now?
Well, that's a great question. And first, I think I heard the administrator talk about the labor market. I think the labor market is an issue that is growing with the tightening of the labor market. That's one of the issues we hear a great deal about. I think financing is still the issue I hear the most about, the availability of finance there. With the shrinking of the community banks, the partners in the SBA programs are a little bit more challenged today. So I think access to capital, particularly for newer small businesses trying to get into the market. The risk capital is always hard for small businesses to obtain. Clearly the microloan program is important, but it leaves gaps. There are challenges in minority businesses, in women-owned businesses, and service-connected disabled veterans. These are all areas that need additional attention. So I think they're the areas. Healthcare is still a problem, but it's not as great a problem as it was, I would say, a decade ago. Now, having said that, what's happening under the Affordable Care Act in the individual marketplace is something that needs to be addressed and is affecting small businesses.
Because in a lot of states, including Maryland, the premiums are going up. And on the labor shortage issue, what's the solution there?
Well, fortunately, the solution is that we got to have people trained for the jobs that are available. We have to make it easier for individuals to get their technical skills. We have to make colleges more affordable. We need a trained workforce, and it's too expensive and too difficult for many people to get the training that they need.
Mm-hmm. What do you hear? The administrator said that she's hearing very positive things about the new tax law, which was supported by most Republicans and no Democrats. What are you hearing about the impact of the tax law?
From a small business point of view, certainly as it relates to business income, most small businesses are in pass-through entities, either pay the individual rate or they are not paying the C rate. So they look at the 20% deduction as to their avenue for relief for their business income. And the preliminary results show that a very small percentage of that money is going to smaller companies. So I don't think the relief is there. I think it's very difficult for small business owners to get through the tax laws. This tax bill did not simplify, nor did it make more predictable our tax code. So from a small business perspective, where they don't have a big staff to deal with the tax issues, I think it has not been helpful.
Now, you work with Chairman Risch on the Small Business Committee as a top Democrat. Actually, and he put out a press release welcoming you back as the ranking member and said you show a mutual respect for one another. That's pretty rare in Washington. How does the committee work, and do you see it as very different than other type of committees in the Senate?
The answer is yes, and it's a pleasure to work with Senator Risch. The two of us are personal friends, and we share a common vision for the Small Business Committee. The Small Business Committee has had a tradition over many, many Congresses as being basically nonpartisan, not only bipartisan, but nonpartisan. We've been able to get a rather healthy agenda of legislation enacted. We generally will use either the National Defense Authorization Act or freestanding bills in order to get our agenda done. So we have had virtually no partisanship in moving forward on our agenda. And we were able to get in the omnibus significant resources for the Small Business Administration. It was not terribly controversial, and yet it was significantly different than what OMB had recommended for the Small Business Administration. So I think we are working in a very positive way. We know the return. The return is pretty high for our economy. Small businesses are the growth engines for employment, for innovation, and Democrats and Republicans both understand that.
What is on the committee agenda? A lot of people saying, well, after the omnibus passed, Congress is closed for business. What is the committee doing for the rest of the year?
Well, we have many priorities, but first starting on the access to capital, I heard the administrator's comments. We want to shorten the time period for loans to be available, not only in disaster circumstances where you really need to shorten it dramatically, in export where we are shortening the time. We also want to do it in regards to the basic financing. So we're trying to expedite the process on consideration on SBA-supported financing. We want to reduce the costs, and we've worked to do that. We want to increase the capacity, so we're looking at ways in which we can provide additional resources by leveraging. So in financing, that's our priority. In government contracting, we are concerned about subcontractor abuse for small businesses, so we're looking at trying again to deal with the concerns on bundling to get more prime contracts to small business owners. In regards to our counseling programs and mentoring programs, we're trying to get through a lot of the red tape. We know the small businesses don't have the big staffs, so we're looking at ways in which we can help in regards to that. Natural disasters, I want to compliment the administration for the manner in which they're handling. We had a major episode in Ellicott City, Maryland, and I must tell you, those small businesses are up and running today after a major flood a little over a year ago. Thanks in part for the Small Business Administration being there the next day. One of the things you hear about is that you have a disaster. It's going to take time for the loans to be approved. We know that. But the small business owners can't seek out the Small Business Administration. They're trying to get their businesses back up. So the SBA has to come to them, and they've done that. And they've been on site not only for the first day, but they've been on there on site for months in order to get these businesses back up. And that's resources that we want to make sure are available at the Small Business Administration.
What could the Trump administration do more on small businesses to foster entrepreneurship?
Well, I think you have to look at the different sources of financing, and clearly the 504 program, which provides the way in which you can build your business, we need to invest more in those types of loans where businesses can actually get the risk capital that they need in order to expand.
Mm-hmm. You recently wrote a letter to SBA with Chairman Rich on cyber attacks.
Right.
What is the danger here? Who's doing the attacking, and what has to be done?
Well, it's a real challenge for small businesses. First of all, the cost issues to protect themselves against cyber can be very expensive. Mm-hmm. So one of the recommendations was made that we somehow be able to develop co-ops and pools so small businesses can take advantage of size to be able to get a more affordable defense to cyber. Secondly, as I said earlier, the small businesses don't have the large administrative staff to deal with these types of problems. So how can we help small businesses sort through what they need to do in order to defend against cyber? We know that identity theft how that's escalating. These are services that we think that we can collectively provide to small businesses to help them marshal through some of these issues. And I think greater confidence that working with us are not going to compromise their intellectual property, that we need to be able to protect their privacy. Small businesses are usually embarrassed when there's a cyber attack, so they don't want to advertise it. Mm-hmm. We've got to work through that to make it clear that we're really here to help them deal with these problems, not to expose their weaknesses, but rather to strengthen their ability to protect their own information.
You've been tracking small businesses and entrepreneurship for a long time. Have you seen some positive effects of more women and minorities getting into them, and what needs to be done on that front?
Oh, absolutely. The trend lines have been very positive on women-owned businesses and minority businesses. We've been tracking those numbers for a period of time. We're still not where we want to be, and these are always goals that we need to pay attention to. But we've invested a significant amount of resources into women-owned businesses. The women's business centers are certainly providing incredible help. We put money in the omnibus for a committee effort to try to deal with women-owned businesses. I applaud my colleague from New Hampshire, Senator Shaheen, for her work in this regard. She's done a great job, and we're going to continue to supplement that. And this has been nonpartisan, bipartisan. We've had hearings on minority businesses and women-owned businesses, and we're going to continue to do that.
10 years ago, almost, we had the financial implosion. Compare that time to now, a decade later, for small businesses.
Well, small businesses are still hurting from that experience. The response, one that I supported, DoddFrank, set up a different regulatory structure, which I think was needed, and I strongly support. But the impact of that is that you have less community banks. And there's now greater scrutiny on performing loans, as there should be. But for new small businesses, for non-traditional small businesses that don't have the revenue flows that are looked upon as by bank regulators to be performing loans, it's more challenging to get a lender who's interested in doing business with you. And yes, our large financial institutions are participating in small business loans. They are. But that's not where their biggest profits are. So they're looking more at the larger companies. So we really do need to pay attention. We don't have the traditional contact between a community lender and a local business that we've had a decade ago. Mm-hmm. That's shrinking. So we have to look at different ways to try to assist the connections between small businesses, particularly new small businesses, or non-conventional. When I mean non-conventional, take a faith-based institution that depends upon the donations of their members in order to finance their expansion. A bank regulator doesn't evaluate that friendly.
Mm-hmm. There's legislation, as you know, that's working its way through Congress. Speaker Ryan said there is a deal to revise DoddFrank. It's made its way through the Senate, got the support of a few Democrats. you don't think that's a wise bill to pass.
No, that's not exactly accurate. I think the provisions as it relates to the community banks is needed.
Okay.
The problem is that bill also included other provisions that go into the larger banking institutions that relax and I think ill-advised changes to DoddFrank as it relates to the bigger institutions. But as it relates to the community banks, I think those reforms are needed.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see the economy going? We've gotten very good economic news. Republicans say it's because of the tax law. Democrats say it's because of the steps that the prior administration had been moving through. Do you see this continued good news continuing?
You know, I know that once I was elected to the Senate, I became an expert on every subject. I know that's it's automatic with the election. I have no idea why the stock market does what it does. To me, it's counterintuitive. So I don't try to guess this. I do know what sound economic policy is about. And in the tax law, to me, it is simplifying and make the tax code more predictable. I don't think we've done that. I don't think this tax bill was particularly helpful to our economy. I also am old-fashioned. I come from a family that believed you only borrowed money when you really needed it, and that you pay your bills. So I believe that this deficit financing is not good for our long-term economy, and that it was not wise to go so far into debt in order to give out tax cuts. So I worry about our fiscal responsibility and having the revenues we need to pay our bills. I think we're wealthy enough to do that. I think it's wrong for me to ask my grandchildren to pay for what we're spending today. So I think the foundation of the American economy is the strongest in the world and will continue to be. The health of our small businesses is critically important to the growth of our economy, and I think we have a lot of healthy things that we've planted. So I have confidence in our economy, but I think deficit financing and how we handle the tax bill is not in our economic long-term interest.
As you know, Senator, it's very polarizing times, and the debt level is basically unsustainable, especially when you look at the future of Medicare and Social Security. What's it going to take for Congress? You know, years ago, we had some talks between President Obama and Speaker Boehner. Almost got a deal, didn't get a deal. Now, 6, 7 years later, what's it going to take for the parties to come together and solve that problem that Republicans during the Obama administration honestly talked about a lot and are talking about less now because we're looking at trillion-dollar deficits?
Leadership and courage. I mean, it really does. We have significant problems in our budget. We need a long-term budget. I would argue that the level of our discretionary spending should not be the subject of significant reductions. We are at historic lows on the discretionary spending, and there's many areas that we need to invest significantly more funds, including, I would suggest, in infrastructure, building our roads, our bridges, our transit systems, our energy grids, our water infrastructure. All that needs significant investment, which means more funds rather than less going into these accounts. We don't invest enough in education, particularly higher education. It's too expensive. So in job training. So there's many areas that I think we need to invest more funds in. But I would argue that our tax code and our mandatory spending are areas that we really need to get a handle on, and we haven't. Now, we are working on the major cost of mandatory spending, healthcare, to try to get a more cost-effective healthcare system in this country. But we still haven't dealt with some of the fundamental problems of the delivery systems and investing in ways that we can manage care in a much more cost-effective way. We certainly haven't dealt with a lot of the cost centers, such as prescription medicines and other costs. We've got to deal with that. So we need a bipartisan agreement on our budget that involves leadership and courage to do the right thing. The last time we really tackled that was during, I guess, the Reagan administration when we looked at the Social Security system. We really do need to take a look at both mandatory spending, our tax code, our revenue structure in this country, including how we finance infrastructure, and put together a long-term budget that is responsible and invest in America's future.
We've got a few minutes left, so we're going to open it up for questions for the senator, and if you can identify yourself and ask your question.
My name is Carolyn Fleming Williams. I'm with the FCC Office of Communications and Business Opportunities. First, I'd like to thank you, Senator Cardin, for your leadership on issues affecting small businesses and women and minority-owned businesses. One of the pathways to success is through supplier diversity, and so I'd like to encourage you to keep that as a priority with respect to how agencies diversify their vendors and their suppliers. And a quick announcement to that end, my office is having a one-day Supplier Diversity Workshop on June 4th, and I have flyers here for anybody who's interested. And again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for that point. I agree with you completely. The supplier diversity is critically important. It's interesting when an agency wants to do the right thing, they can get the right thing done. And that's leadership within the different departments. There's a lot of agencies that say they're meeting their goals, but when you really drill down, they're not. So supplier diversity is critically important. As I said earlier, prime contracts are critically important for small businesses. I love big companies. They do great things, and subcontracting work is very important, and there's a lot of jobs that cannot be delegated to small businesses, but through the supply chain, you can.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Emilia Cortez, and as you may know, three of the big areas of the industry that are very well known for small business is the construction, the food industry, and the IT. So from your point of view, what is the impact that those three areas are being affected from the immigration new policies?
Your question is in regards to immigration?
Immigration and workforce.
Yeah, I am a strong believer in the fact that we're in a global economy, we're in a global world. I strongly disagree with President Trump's immigration policies. I've been very vocal about my opposition to it. I do think in regards to the worker provisions within immigration, they need to be reformed. Where we do not have adequate workforce here, we should have certainly guest worker visas that allow the workers to come in. I met just recently with a local winery in Maryland that relies very much on the H-1B visas. That's critically important to them. That workforce is not here. They rely upon a guest worker. We know the H-2B issues with the seafood industry in Maryland. So there are a lot of, but they have to be used appropriately. They shouldn't be used to get around America's labor protection laws. And we have to make sure they're not being used inappropriately. But I do believe in comprehensive immigration reform and dealing with the realities of those that are here, the dreamers, those who are here on temporary protective status need to be protected. So I'm for comprehensive immigration reform. I disagree with the president's message on immigration. I don't think we need a wall on our southern border. Let's use that money for investing in things like education and infrastructure and issues like that.
One more question.
Hello, good morning. Thank you again, Senator, for your time. My name is Komi Akpala. I'm just a very curious mind. So, I know you guys, the administrator and yourself have touched a little bit on the effect on minorities and women, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how we can counter the effects of gentrification on minority communities as far as wiping away small businesses in minority communities.
Attack on, you said on class?
Gentrification. Yeah.
Look, when I first got elected to the United States Senate, that was 12 years ago, I asked to serve on the Small Business Committee because of the importance of small business to the Maryland economy and to our national economy. And my first month in office, I invited the SBA people into my office and looked at the numbers and saw that there was a real problem in dealing with minority businesses, dealing with women-owned businesses. I looked also at the quality of the contracts that are being given out by the federal agencies. I also looked at the way that we were reaching out and knew we could do things a lot better than we had done in the past. And it was very interesting. We noticed that if a department really wanted to do the right thing, there was no difficulty in doing the right thing. But here was the major challenge. The major challenge, we found that procurement officers were under budgeted and understaffed and under tremendous pressure, and had a challenge inviting new companies to participate when they had existing relationships and they knew that it was safe to do business with certain contractors that were usually the big companies and not as diverse as we wanted them to be. So what we've tried to do is develop confidence in agencies to reach out and do the right thing. Now, we have certain programs that require them to do that, but it's how they implement those programs that really is a defining moment. So, as I said earlier, we've made progress. We have. But there are still many departments and agencies that are not doing the right thing. We still have the pressure on procurement officers because of their budget, and they're concerned that they'll be criticized if they take a risk on a new company that we have to overcome. Some of that is done through single source, which is always has controversy, but single source works. So we need to use single source, and I think expand single source to those areas where we need to make improvements. And we are looking in our committee as to how we can encourage those types of decision making. The bottom line is that life is full of risks. There are always going to be risks. That's what business is about. Entrepreneurship is about risk. Not everybody's going to succeed. Not every loan is going to be the right loan. Not every decision made by a procurement officer is going to be the right decision. But we do want them to understand that the strength of America is in our diversity and inclusion, and that we want to make sure that their work product reflects the country that we live in, and that they're inviting the type of participation that will make America stronger. So that's what we are looking at. That's what we're trying to encourage through the programs and through our oversight. And what I said earlier to Bob, this is nonpartisan, bipartisan in our committee, and we're going to continue to try to grow in the strength of America, which is our small businesses, young entrepreneurs. You know, I always like to give the example of a University of Maryland student who needed a loan to start an idea he had on new sportswear, and he took out a small loan from the SBA, gave him a chance, and now we have this business originally had around $15,000 of sales. It's now a multi-billion-dollar Under Armour, creating thousands and thousands of jobs in my community. Giving a loan to a student, a college student, was a risk factor, but it paid off big time. And that's what we need to do. We need to reach out and recognize that diversity is our strength, and give opportunities to young people and new people and creative people that have been left out too long in our community.
We've run out of time. Please thank Senator Cardin for joining us this morning, and I hand it back to Diana. Thank you, Senator. That was great.